these jokes in there, and kids will never even notice. So the goal of today, we're going to introduce a couple new things, but not too much. I think it took us about a half hour in the first section, and then we were done. So wasn't sure how long this would take, and I'm going to review some things that we went over in the online lecture about McGee's different stages, and then send you off, because really the big goal of this week is to do the first exam, which will open up tomorrow morning, and I'll talk about that before you go. So that's it. Did you enjoy your spring break? Was it worth getting? Awesome spring break, right? Oh, yes. Unbelievable, unforgettable, I'm sure. Well, let's actually start here. So again, I'm talking about this assuming that you've watched the online lecture and took notes over that. Just kind of going over some of these. I want to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page. So remember, Paul McGee created his theory, a stage theory of humor development, by taking Jean Piaget's theory, which is why we spent so much time going over that last time. He took Jean Piaget's theory and circumposed his theory of humor on top of it. So here's the slide that sort of lays out where we're at. That's kind of an important understanding of where we're at in Piaget, where are we at in humor. The two kind of describe each other. And another important feature of this, I'm not sure if I really said this explicitly or not, but McGee wasn't saying, as he goes through some of these things, that this is the only thing a kid is laughing at. He's not saying, here's your humor and that's it. It just seemed like, and does seem like, a kid's humor shifts into what's, I guess, particularly funny at that age. So just keep that in mind. He's not saying this is the only thing that makes a kid laugh. But most obviously, again, just walking through these, the first two stages, and I've never really known if it was intentional, like as a joke, to make his first stage 0, but I've always liked that. I've never ever seen that before. I just find it absolutely hysterical that the first stage is called stage 0. So as I'm talking about that, please keep in mind. So his first two stages are stages 0 and 1. No true humor, but here's where that debate that we talked about last week comes into. Do you think it starts at 4 months, or do you think it starts around 2 years? Well, McGee said no. In these early years, yeah, there's smiling and laughter in the sensory motor stage. Of course there is. And we kind of walked through last week how that even progresses, smiling and laughter. And then that second stage, which, well, really stage 1, also in the sensory motor stage, that's where we see the peekaboo stuff. That's like our 6 to 9 months, 12 months or so, where there's humor in a safe, playful, non-threatening environment with an attachment figure. So no real humor, at least according to McGee. That doesn't become possible until the very strangely named stage 2, the third stage, which is incongruous actions towards objects. That's what the I, the A, the T, and the O stand for. It's a mouthful, and if you've never heard it before, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But if you understand what he's talking about, it's perfect, because symbolic play is just that. You're playing with an object, and you're pretending it's one thing that it's not. You're performing an incongruous action towards this object. That's exactly what he's talking about. And to McGee, this one is huge. So big asterisk beside this one, because this is when humor is possible. So this is where he first sees humor as possible. It's not really like adult humor yet, but it's definitely possible at this point because of pretend play. And that's where this comes in too. We talked about assimilation and accommodation last week. Assimilation, you take a schema and you apply it to the information. And that's why you don't learn anything. Fantasy assimilation is taking a schema for something and purposely applying it to an object incorrectly on purpose. And that's what you think is funny. So you pretend this block is a car by taking your car schema and putting it on the block. And that's how pretend play is possible from a cognitive point of view. So incongruous actions towards objects. And then we get the incongruous labeling of objects. Stage number 3, playful language. Again, this is the perfect example of this isn't the only thing kids laugh at, but it sure is kind of a central point. Again, I never know how much time you guys spend around kids of different ages, but if you hang around with a kid who's about 3-4 years old, think of that cognitive congruency principle. These kids are in the midst of what we call the vocabulary explosion. To you take something else you take for granted. You know what a cow is, and know what a car is, and you know what everything is. Well, they're just learning all this stuff. They're learning all these names, and in fact, it's amazing. I think the human vocabulary explodes by like 50,000 words like per 6 months. Like that's the explosion they're developing inside their head. So what's funny? Labeling things incorrectly because you're just learning all this stuff. So it becomes funny to just kind of play with language and play with words because that's what you're mastering. Then we get to me, this is where when you watch a kid's movie like Shrek or Toy Story, this is where a lot of the humor is focused. This last pre-operational stage number 4, conceptual incongruity. This is where kids are not just laughing at mislabeling things, but attributes. So things will just look strange. Think on the online lecture I was talking about, if you take a giraffe and give it a really short neck, that becomes hysterical because they know that's just conceptually incorrect and it just becomes goofy. And it's something that we can all laugh at. It's also, though, where we see, I think I went over the proto-humor. So do you remember that? Proto-jokes and proto-humor. This is when those become possible. So kids will say, it sounds like a joke. It sounds like the right setup, but there's really no the correct punchline, but they laugh at it. Just like a proto-word that we talked about in class, there's also proto-humor. And then finally, we get to stage number 5, and this one is also really big. It's not the last one, but this is where multiple meanings is possible. And again, if you think of the crossover, kids are mastering conservation. That's actually the key to this. This is where the harmony is between Piaget and Paul McGee. Multiple meanings are possible, so let us, funny that you understand both meanings at the same time, just like you understand the height of the glass and the width of the glass, or the number of quarters and how long the line of quarters is. Same concept. Once you get over centration, a pun is suddenly funny. So same concept, just a different way of applying it. And then finally, where you guys are at, I think, most of you looking around there, is you've finally matured into, there's a category of Piaget's theory called formal operations. That's where the what ifs are possible, right? You see the gray. And this is where subtleties and sarcasm and what we call abstract humor is finally possible to laugh at. And I think I mentioned in the lecture, I try to show you what we mean by abstract humor. It's a type of humor that doesn't really have any other category other than just being bizarre. Put it that way. Now, let me show you an example of what I mean by abstract humor. Whether or not you like it or not, or find it's funny, it's a really good example of it. So what they mean by, anyone know what they mean by minus Williams? Star Wars minus Williams, right? Well, so a key to Star Wars is the soundtrack. There's music constantly playing in the background that, right, makes you feel a certain way. Well, what happens if we step into the shoes of the actual characters? Because, of course, if you are really experiencing what they're experiencing, there's not like there's a soundtrack in your life, right? When you walk around, wouldn't it be awesome? You can like push a button and the soundtrack, like dramatic music when you enter the room. Like, oh. No, so what's it really like? Well, let's take away the soundtrack and watch one of the famous scenes, and suddenly becomes a little creepy. Oh, again, you might not think it's funny, but that's what we mean by the world of abstract humor. It doesn't really have a category, it's just weird. It's just absolutely weird. It's not regressive, it's not sexual, it's not regressive, it's just abstract. We'll get to tendential opening in a few minutes, but just before we move beyond this, I'll have some new notes coming up, just a little bit. Any questions on the stages or how it unfolds? All right, so moving on from that then. When Lettuce Girl, that's Hayden, when she was 3, her older sister was 7. They're always 4 years apart. Well, we thought this would be the perfect time to take them to Disney World for the first time. Because everyone, I'm not sure if you've ever heard this phrase, but they always say that Disney World was created with 3-year-olds, right? Well, more on that later someday. But anyway, so we did the fun thing of kind of making it a surprise. Now, there's no way. Our kids are too smart. We could never do the, don't tell them until the day before we go. I couldn't keep a secret for that long anyway. But we did we told them that we were going to have some kind of surprise for them. And Hayden's 3, Kyla's 7, and before they were going to bed, I told them, and I must have said it with a pretty straight face, but I told them, you guys are going to die when we tell you what we're doing tomorrow. And that was it. That was the last thing I said when they went to bed. Because you're be so excited. But I said, you're going to die. Kyla was excited. She woke up she couldn't wait. She's like, oh my God. Hayden didn't sleep at all because I told her you're going to die in the morning. And she was worried that whatever we were going to tell them was potentially going to make them die, which reminded me, oh, wait, you're 3. You don't understand sarcasm. And I kind of threw that out there. So we're getting ready for Disney. And I just told one of my kids that you're going to pass away. Well, that's because little kids, when they're tiny, you really don't truly master this until you enter that formal operation. So this is the last stage. Abstract humor, irony, sarcasm, really the door becomes wide open because you understand that gray. You're not dichotomous thinking, taking really the literal meanings of things. And again, like everything else in the world of humor, once you dissect something, right, it starts becoming very academic and serious. And oh my God, please don't let me think of every joke like this. I'm ignoring the surface meaning and applying. No, don't do that. But this is literally what's happened. Something you take for granted because it happens so quick. But when you understand the process that has to unfold, you can appreciate why a 3 to 5-year-old really doesn't get this. Because number one, you have to absolutely ignore what the person's saying. You're going to die. And you have to understand the true message. You guys are going to be so excited. And at the same time, you have to substitute these two. Now, that's just the cognitive aspect. You have to understand that there's a false message being told to you. You have to understand that there's a hidden, not even mentioned, true message getting thrown at you. So you have to understand and apply what that is without even anyone telling you. And then you have to substitute them simultaneously. And that's why it's supposed to be funny. But there's also some pragmatics involved. You understand, because you understand the person, that there's an intent of humor. What they're going to say is not intended because it's ironic or sarcastic. But the two pragmatics of it, and I know I'm going in the wrong order, you know the person's message is intended to be funny or have an opposite meaning. When I said you're going to die, I was trying to get them even more excited. And using irony and sarcasm, it has a purpose. You could say something really aggressive or really inappropriate, and if it's not being taken that way, you can get away with saying pretty much anything, right? Because it muffles. The irony and the sarcasm muffles the aggression, muffles the true message, almost like it doesn't exist. I told the previous section that was right here, they were just in your seats. Isn't that fun? Who is it? Who is Team A? They were right here. Now you've been replaced. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's like Nick. He's in Team A. He's here, though. Like a fly on the wall. Where do you usually sit? Isn't it like there? There. Sorry, I didn't. That's perfectly fine. But no, I had a roommate, Jeff, in college. I had lots of roommates, but he used to, I think he partly does to scare me. I'd wake up most days. I never knew if he was going to be there or not. But imagine opening your dorm room and there's just someone there. Like he would just be there, like just standing right there, like right in front of. And of course, I'm Mr. Like, I'm still like that because I'm not a morning person. But I would like look, and there would be Jeff, and he would just smile and go, "Good morning, asshole." Is he being? No, he's being ironic. He really means, "I love you, Kevin." Right? So, but there's no aggression there. There's nothing there, and that's exactly how irony works. It muffles that something you would find offensive by anyone else, and the intent of humor. All of this becomes possible because of a concept that slowly starts to develop right around anywhere between the ages of 5 and 8. That's why that's down there at the bottom. It doesn't really become fully mature until you enter formal operations, according to Piaget. We start to see hints of it, though, at young ages, but it really becomes completely mature. What in the world is this? So this concept is what makes sarcasm possible. It's a psychological concept. It's not a humor concept. So you might have picked this up along the way in any psych development class. If you did take a development, I hope you picked this up somewhere. Anyone know what this means? Theory of mind. All right, well, I'll give you the same example. Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Basically understanding that your mind is separate from others and they have their own thoughts and feelings.
Exactly, and intentions and all of this. So think of egocentrism. It's like the opposite of egocentrism, with the kid that was saying what he sees, but in an even more broad sense. So with egocentrism, we're literally talking about visually, you're unable to take someone's perspective, which is why you're terrible at hide and seek when you're 3. The way I described it earlier, about a half hour ago, was, well, let's say I had my 3 and 7. I took my 2 daughters, and we walked into like a school, and over in the corner, there were 2 boys playing, and they were building a tower, and one of the boys knocked the tower down and then stormed off. The 3-year-old who doesn't have a theory of mind might say something like, "That kid's a jerk," or "That was really mean," or "Oh my gosh, like he just knocked the tower down," and that would be it. That's where the conversation would stop. Like, yes, that was the wrong thing to do. Yes, it was. The 7-year-old might say something like, "Wow, that was mean," but then also have a thought of, "I wonder what made that kid so angry. I wonder if that kid's having a bad day," because what she's doing is she's thinking about that kid's intentions, about what's going on inside his head. That's exactly what theory of mind is. The ability to put yourself empathetically in someone else's shoes. Theory of mind, that is what makes empathy possible. You're able to put yourself in someone's shoes and try to at least understand what they're thinking, what their intentions are, what their motivations are. And again, that's why this starts out with some hints of, okay, I kind of get it. And it starts out really rudimentary, like the egocentrism piece. Like the first step is understanding that someone literally has a different perspective. The next step is understanding they have a different perspective emotionally and cognitively. Like Macy said, you know what goes on inside your own mind. Now you're realizing, oh my gosh, everyone has their own mind and everyone likes different things, does different things, and experiences different things. Maybe that's why this kid's a jerk at school every day. So any questions here? So the development of sarcasm. When do you get the chance to learn that? Well, now you did. And the last thing, I was going to go a little bit further than this, but I'm just going to hit the brakes here for the exam. The last concept. This is something, McGee put it this way. McGee liked a lot of what Freud had to say. A lot of us do. In the humor field, Freud, I think, said some important things that are still relevant. But Freud's theory wasn't really a theory of development. It was just a theory of what makes things funny. Well, one thing McGee took from Freud and applied to his theory is this thing he calls tendential coping. Coping? Just coping. There's no other syllables in there. Tendential coping. So, of course, tendential, you're used to it meaning sexual or aggressive. It means something a little bit further than that. I'll put it this way. Go up to try this. Go to Walmart and find a 4-year-old. Can I borrow your child? I'd like to try something. Go up to a 4-year-old or a 3, anywhere in that range, so toddlerhood, and just look at them and say, poop. They'll probably start laughing because what we don't talk about that, right? Poop and toilet and pee-pee and toilet paper, that's stuff that happens in the bathroom. Oh my, and they'll just giggle. and they'll laugh. And if you listen to their conversations and their jokes, little preschool kids will often joke about things like the toilet and the potty, because those are things, they're not like taboo things, right? They're just things that you don't normally talk about. Like we talk about the weather and the Browns and whatever. We don't talk about pooping, and we just don't talk about those are things that we do behind closed doors. By tendential, McGee means anything that provokes like a twinge of anxiety, something that makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Which is why this concept, by the way, also works with adults. Which is why you can still be in college and say the word penis out loud and because we don't say these things, right? These are words, even in like a sex ed class. Like, oh my God, do I have to say that out loud? Yes. So it's not like there's anything wrong with these things at all. It's just things that make most people feel a little bit uncomfortable. So everyone's tendential coping humor is a little bit different because we all have different degrees of this makes me uncomfortable, this doesn't, this doesn't, this doesn't. Does that make sense? Tendential. And kids use this. And McGee argued that kids will be laughing at and make jokes of things that are currently on their radar of, ooh. For example, when kids go through puberty, this is when sexually themed jokes become really popular amongst like 7th grade boys and girls and 8th grade, right? Right in that age range, because this is the big thing that, ooh, no one's talking about. So that's when that kind of hits a peak, I guess, in childhood. Whereas potty jokes are really funny with the younger. Any questions? All right, well, that's where we decided to hit the brakes. So that's the last concept for this, for the exam. So just like, yeah, it's the same amount of time, about a half hour to get through this stuff. So the exam itself, it'll open up Friday morning. It'll close Sunday at midnight. So there's no need to feel like some kind of rush to take it Friday at 8 o'clock. So you've got until, it's just going to be hanging out there for you to take. Mostly multiple choice, but there will be 3 short answers too to type in. What that means is when you submit it, the multiple choice will grade itself. And you might like freak out because you're, oh my God, my grade. Well, the short answers won't grade themselves because the computer doesn't know what the right answer is. So I have to go in and manually grade those. So just keep that in mind when you submit it. It's not really done yet. I'll try to keep tabs on when people are submitting them and kind of on a rolling basis. Like every Sunday, then I just keep grading them as they kind of come in. So let's keep that in mind. And the multiple choice, they're graded on a scale of 0 to 5. The only way you could get a 0 is if you just don't do it. Like if you just like skip it, like, okay, that's your choice. Even if you try, even if you're completely wrong, as long as you give it the old college try, I'll give you a point. Just try. So again, the only way you'll get 0 is if you just throw up the white flag and just move on. And then grade it suddenly through there. So 5 points for a perfect answer. Any questions? No? All right. Well, that's all I got. So I won't see you again until next week. Just like every other week. If you do have any questions between